Close your eyes, block out the world around you, and listen with your heart. Do not allow fear to crush your breath. If you believe yourself brave enough, if you dare to walk where others tremble, then step with me into the shadows. For this is not merely a story, it is a curse that still breathes. If your courage holds, let us begin. In the quiet, forgotten village of Ammersberg, time itself feels reluctant to move forward. Narrow cobblestone streets snake through houses of wood and stone, their roofs sagging with age, their walls heavy with stories long buried. The villagers live with their heads lowered, their voices hushed whenever the topic drifts to the outskirts of town. For there, standing like a sentinel of despair, looms Crowley Manor, an enormous Gothic ruin whose spires claw at the sky like broken teeth. The fog around it never lifts. By day, it sits like a corpse beneath the gray clouds, a reminder of what once was. But night, however, its presence grows alive. The villagers know the signs. On the nights of the full moon, when silver light falls across its shattered windows and crumbling walls, a sound drifts through the fog. A melody, thin, haunting, dripping with sorrow. The cry of a violin, carried on the wind, slipping through the cracks of doors and shutters, no matter how tightly they are sealed. This is no ordinary song. It is the playing of Edgar Crowley, the last of his bloodline, a man whose gift with the violin bordered on the supernatural. His performances had once brought nobles to tears, had once filled entire halls with thunderous applause. But genius is often cursed, and Edgar's genius was no exception. One dreadful night, after years of obsession, he composed his final piece, a symphony unlike any other, the melody of death. The villagers recall how he was found, lifeless, his chest still wrapped around his broken violin, as though even in death he clung to the very thing that destroyed him. Since then, Crowley Manor has been sealed in fear. Generations have lived and died, and yet none dared enter its halls. For all knew that Edgar's music still lingered there, waiting, hungering. But there was one who could not resist. Alma Richter, a young violinist with a fire in her heart, had spent her life entranced by Edgar's works. His music was not just inspiration, it was obsession. She studied every scrap of composition she could find, every rumor, every whisper, every incomplete measure. To her, Edgar was not simply a legend, he was a ghost, calling to her across the centuries, and Alma was determined to answer. The villagers warned her. They begged her not to go, but Alma's hunger burned brighter than their fears. On the night of the full moon, she took her violin and walked into the suffocating fog. Step by step, the manor revealed itself. Its gates rusted and bent, its walls etched with cracks like scars, its windows hollow eyes staring down at her approach. The very air seemed to resist her, thick and heavy, as if the house itself were alive and unwilling to be disturbed. The door groaned open at her touch, a sound so loud it seemed to awaken the silence within. Dust fell from the ceiling as she stepped inside. The air was colder, heavier, as though the house inhaled with her. Shadows clung to the corners, shifting when she turned her head. Every step of her boots echoed too loudly, as if mocking her courage. Room after room passed in eerie stillness, grand halls filled with broken chandeliers, corridors lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her. She could almost hear faint whispers, too soft to understand, just enough to set her skin crawling. And then, at last, she found it. Edgar's study. The room was frozen in time. Dust coated every surface, yet the heart of the chamber seemed untouched. There stood a music stand, and upon it the shattered remains of Edgar's violin. Its strings were gone, but its presence was heavy, powerful, almost as though it still breathed. Beside it lay the sheet music, the melody of death, its pages yellowed with age, but its notes sharp, itched like scars into the paper. Alma's chest tightened. Her hands trembled, but not with fear, but with anticipation. She lifted her own violin, set it beneath her chin, and drew her bow across the strings. The first note broke the silence like glass. The second filled the air with a weight that pressed against her skin. The third seemed to open a door she could not see. And then, at last, the house awakened. The melody poured out of her violin, dark and beautiful, pulling the shadows closer with every measure. The air grew bitterly cold, her breath spilling in pale clouds, her heart pounding against her ribs. The walls seemed to breathe, the floor groaned beneath her, and from the corners of the room they came. Spectral figures, half-formed and pale as mist, drifting like echoes of forgotten lives. Their faces twisted in agony, their mouths open in endless silent screams. Their eyes, if they could be called eyes, were hollow, yet they stared at Alma with unbearable weight. They were the souls trapped within the symphony, victims of Edgar's cursed genius. Bound forever, they circled her, swaying with the music. Alma tried to stop. She begged her hands to cease, her bow to freeze, but the violin would not let her. The music poured out of her like blood from a wound, each note tightening an invisible chain around her spirit. The higher the melody climbed, the more her strength drained away, as if the music itself fed on her life. The climax drew near. Alma's arms shook, her vision blurred, her knees weakened, yet she could not stop. The apparitions leaned closer, their whispers now rising in chorus, their cries merging with the notes. The final measure struck like thunder. Alma's breath caught, then fled her body. Her violin sang the last note as her soul was torn free, absorbed into the endless, merciless symphony. That night the villagers listened, and they knew. For when the fog carried the music to their ears, they no longer heard one violin, but two. Edgar and Alma, bound together in death, their melodies entwined in eternal sorrow. Their duet still drifts from the manor each full moon, beckoning the curious, calling the daring. And those who follow are never seen again. Some believe it is a curse,
Others attest, but all agree the music is no longer just a song. It is a door, and once opened, it cannot be closed. So, I ask you now, are your eyes still closed? Do you hear the violins? If the notes are reaching you even now, then beware, for perhaps the melody has already chosen its next player.